Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's video we're going to be highlighting a tree, the Trembling Aspen, or the scientific name Populus tremuloides, I believe. So this is a tree that many of us see throughout Western North America, right from the southwestern US all the way, higher elevations there, all the way into Northwest Territories, Yukon and Canada, and Alaska, of course. So this is a tree that is kind of a pioneer tree in certain areas. Other areas it's completely dominant, like the aspen parkland ecosystem in the northern, western, and even eastern prairies in Canada, and the foothills region in all along the Rocky Mountains, right through the U.S. So it's a colonial tree, and it also produces seeds, so it reproduces quite readily. One tree can become quite literally a forest. So what we have here is kind of a even aged aspen forest, likely a disturbance 30 or so years ago here in this area. It would be logging, and the trembling aspen colonized the area and is now the dominant tree until you can see there's small spruce, the odd lodgepole pine right here, until those trees overgrow in shade or another disturbance pulls through here, like logging or a fire. These are the going to be the kind of dominant species in this area. So undergrowth wise, we have a lot of grasses and alder. Here's an alder, and quite a bit of that. And grasses and wild rose are probably the dominant undergrowth species here, because these forests do let in a lot of light. They're fairly evenly spaced, and so the grasses kind of thrive here. I'm going to show, we're right on the border between a younger aspen dominated forest, very, very dense, and this kind of more mature, where some of the weaker trees have died out, and it's a lot more spaced and a lot more open understory and canopy. As you can see, the canopy is not closed. There's quite a bit of open spaces, which allows the grasses to dominate underneath. So we'll just move into this kind of younger section here and have a look. Okay, here's a great example of just how dense these young aspen forests can be. This area is quite young, maybe, just guessing, maybe 20 years old, something like that, maybe 25. It's thick, small diameter trees. There is quite a dense undergrowth of alder and a few spruce growing through, and the odd lodgepole. And these areas they grow very quickly, very densely, and then shortly thereafter they will space out as competition, for light, and certain trees will fall due to disease, due to snow load, this type of thing. They will fall and die and leave more space, like these ones. Another issue you may see on a lot of trees, a lot of aspens, is something called frost cankers. This particular tree has some damage, but there can be actually massive damage to these trees, and they can still live. I think here's another example right here. This is a healed over area of damage, and one of the defenses the tree makes is lower down. They have this extremely heavy bark scales, and this kind of strengthens the area opposite the damage. But above, we have kind of that gray not as scaly, but just intermittently scaly bark. And if you rub this bark, there'll be a kind of a powdery film on your hands. So it acts like almost like a sunscreen. And this bark, I believe, is actually photosynthetic as well. So just another kind of advantage, or parts of the bark are. But this bark covered with that powder is pretty much all the smoother areas of the bark. So there's a good view up into the canopy. As you can see, broken, lots of space for light, and as a result, these mature aspen forests are pretty pleasant to walk through. It's open, it's sunny, it's a little overcast today, but it's generally really easy to walk through. Just kind of a grassy undergrowth, and just a pleasant place to be. Okay, here's a bit of a close-up of a young specimen, not in the best of health. However, it just gives us a good idea of the leaf shape. You can see, there we go, it's a rounded leaf with some small kind of toothed edges. And here's something interesting you see on many aspens in this area, and you can see this pattern on the leaf, and that is from something called a leaf miner. And that goes between the layers of the leaf, and you can see it's pretty much dominant on this tree here. And it's a small kind of parasitic insect that lives on the material in between the outer two layers of the leaf. And I'll look underside here, and you can't really tell about damage underside, but on the top side you sure can. So these leaves, these rounded kind of delicate leaves that even in the slightest breeze have a lot of movement, and there's a lot of sound of the leaves moving in this forest here. There we go. We'll look up top here, a little ways away, but you can see the leaves are moving. That's where the name Trembling Aspen comes from. Just the slightest breeze will set them kind of going. Now, it looks similar to, but is not the same species as this particular one here. This is a young balsam poplar, and you can see the leaf shape is slightly different. It's more elongated, and it too is subject to the leaf miner damage, but it's a little bit different. Now I'm going to have a look here at kind of how dense these younger aspen forests can be. And in certain areas, they're not going to get to the size that we just saw. Certain areas, as they become a little more marginal, are always going to be small. And by marginal, actually, what I mean is where generally as we move into the prairies, as the climate is a little drier, the aspens are almost single species in certain areas, very dense clumps, colonal clumps, and some may only be 10 or 12 feet tall and a couple inches wide, like the trunk diameter. So they can be very dense. Okay, one more thing I wanted to point out here on the understory in these aspen forests is generally they're a little bit drier. We have a fair amount of, I guess, fallen logs from ones that died for one reason or another, and there's not a lot of moss growth. There's not a lot of lichen growth necessarily on these fallen logs. It tends to kind of rot fairly slowly, and without a lot of moisture. So one kind of a characteristic is it does take quite a while for these to decompose under these conditions. You can see this one here being up in the open air will probably take quite a while to fully decompose. So another kind of unique aspect to the forest floor here. Okay, so we're gonna end this video off here just in this nice open, airy, kind of pleasant aspen forest. It's one of those trees that is dominant in so many areas and so successful, as it's very quick growing and grows in, you know, gravelly soils, grows in wet areas, grows in dry areas. This is kind of a southern facing hillside, so it's quite dry. Doesn't get a lot of deep snow in the winter. The snow melts off pretty fast, but yet, you know, it's this tree has managed to kind of dominate this area, and it won't last forever. One thing or another will happen. It'll either burn, be logged, or if allowed to continue on, will be dominated by eventually a white spruce kind of dominant forest here, and potentially lodgepole. But this area is subject to disturbances such as fire and logging, so these things may not be allowed to kind of continue into a mature forest, but a beautiful spot to be. And until next time, thanks.